Okay. So imagine your life at peak impact,
Hmm.
and I want you to draw your impact.
Okay. Trauma impact.
Okay,
Hmm.
you wanna show it to me and describe it?
Right, let me see that.
Yeah, I like
So this is a graph or a network that represents like information, um, and then a rocket ship.
it.
It's kind of like flying into the stars represented by this network. Um, yeah, like that seems like a good symbol of the impact in general that I want to make, but as well as the specific impact of Weave.
Okay, and what does that mean to you? Like,
So there's like a phrase that Steve Jobs said once that always sticks, like it's always stuck with me since I heard it, which is like software is a bicycle for the mind. And like he talked about this kind of graph of when you look at like the energy output of different things and then how much work they can do for that energy. And most animals fall on this kind of linear line. And then there's this massive outlier, which is a human on a bicycle. And they can move like so much faster and so much further for relatively little energy. And software is like that for the mind, right? You can think of things and then you can automate them in code, and it allows us to move so much faster. And that's always been at the core of why I've loved software, why I love building things, because it's just cool to like build a thing that just runs and then I can walk away and it's just doing its thing, you know? And that's been my driving force in software. Like I just love that idea. I love automating things. I love trying to make my life more efficient and trying to build tools to make other lives more efficient. So the wine thing, we're trying to make wines like more efficient. Like everything is about like how can we use software to move faster? And I feel like that's really speeding up because of uh, AI. And so this graph with a rocket is kind of I'm imagining building things that are a rocket ship for the mind rather than just
mm-hmm.
a bicycle.
Like,
So how can we, so this is like the kind of overarching idea behind Weave is like, how can we build something that allows one person to not just move like one person on a bicycle, but to move like 100 people in race cars? Like, how's that possible? And what tools can we build for that? And what does that even look like? And those are kind of the questions that I like to ponder. And that's what this is. It's like a rocket ship flying into this like network of information
mhm.
and trying to make sense of it.
So to you, the mind is like an information processor. Like, what is,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, like what is that end goal, right?
that would definitely be like my archetype as a person is I'm very driven by information and truth and knowing as much as I can, learning as much as I can. And just for the sake of it most of the time, like I'm not I derive pleasure directly from learning, from just figuring things out. And quite often, and that's actually been a struggle for me over my life, actually, that I get the dopamine from figuring it out, not from doing it.
Hmm.
Once I've figured out the problem, it's no longer that interesting to me. So when I was younger, I had this real habit of like learning something until it clicked. And then I'm like, oh, I understand this now. I get it. I can put the pieces together in my mind. Now all I have to do is sit down and do that. And it
Hmm.
was boring for me at that point. I'm like, I know how it works. I don't need to. So I would just hop between things, get nothing done. So now, like moving as I've got older, I've harnessed that more, and yeah, I can like manage it a lot better now. But I can now use that energy of like this curiosity to now steer myself in a good direction and still have the diligence to sit down and do it.
What changed? Like, what made you go from, okay, I'm bored, on to the next thing to I gotta hunker down and actually apply.
Um, I mean, it's something that I've thought a lot about actually, and I think like the true answer at its like deepest that I've been able to figure out is I was terrified of being an underachiever.
Mm.
Um, I always felt like I had a lot of promise, like a lot of energy inside of me that could succeed, a lot of potential, but I was almost like happy about that and not. And then suddenly started to realize in my mid 20s, I'm like, my life is like moving away with me, and I haven't actually started to try and produce the evidence of the way that I feel about myself. Like I'm always this ball of potential, but like I'm gonna have to turn that into something eventually.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I'm just gonna be an underachiever. I'm gonna be the guy that could have done something but never did, and that really terrified me when I really realized that in my mid 20s, and I was like, okay, I need to figure out how I can sit down and just do the work
Hmm.
rather than just assuming it'll happen one day. I have to actually work to make that potential real.
And this is fascinating because like I relate so much. Um, and what what would you tell your whatever 18-year-old self after knowing
Um,
this fear and then knowing the kind of antidote, which is like evidence, right?
mhm.
Well,
Yeah. I mean, I
how
would
would
say
the
that
yeah.
I, I think I would try to convince, like, I would try to make an argument of like, you're right, but your perspective of time is really bad. Um, you have way less time than you think to get it done. Because it takes like to actually get good at things, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. It's very easy, especially like today. It's really easy to sell the dream that like if you just spend $99 and 3 weeks on this course, you're going to know how to do whatever thing that you want to do. But in reality, it takes years of turning up every day to get good at something. And the earlier you start on that, the further ahead you're going to be. And then you get to really benefit from the compounding. And that's where it really comes. So the people who are real killers start like programming when they're like 12. And then by the time they hit like 21, they're starting these multi-billion-dollar companies because they've already got a decade of experience of writing code. So they're already into the kind of playful expression phase of like a skill where they're so competent with it that they can just express themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're all aiming to be. But if you only start when you're 25, it's like you're quite a way behind. And you have other life responsibilities, so you have less time to put into it. So you're on the sharp end of that compounding curve. It's not in your favor, but the earlier you start, the more likely that compounding curve is in your favor.
Amazing.
So just start early would
So
be my
yeah,
advice to 18-year-old
and
me.
you kind of also like the exercise was draw your impact at peak impact, but you almost drew like a concept, right? Like it's not even you at a point in time, right?
Yeah, that's true. I suppose that's I don't know. I was trying to psychoanalyze why I would have done that, but I think maybe it's because I don't really resonate with the idea of like a singular point in time. Um,
Mhm.
Like I'm much more of a process person than a goal person. I've never really been a goal person. I don't resonate with goals very much because I change. I want to do different things and I'm still expressing the same energy, but it's like the way it wants to manifest is different now. And setting a goal just feels too rigid because I might want to change. I might want to pivot in a different direction. And then I have to change the goal and it feels like I'm moving the goalpost. So I'd much rather just be like, I'll set a process and
Mhm.
that's an ever going process. It's constantly changing. So I don't really think in terms of like a specific point in the future or a specific
Mhm.
outcome in the future. I think of more of like what's the trajectory of everything, and
Mhm.
that represents for me like the trajectory of everything that I work on and work towards is moving through like more and more energy, like as an individual to go through a bit larger and larger units of work, of like work, however you define it. That doesn't have to be like professional work, just like work in more of the physics sense of like towards achieving whatever you want to achieve. So that could be like
Mhm.
producing more artwork, or it could be like building a business or raising a family or whatever
Yeah,
that
no,
is.
I understand what you're saying. Um, like I always say that yeah, you want to create a goal of an identity, not a goal of ownership. Right?
Hmm.
It's not like, oh, I want to own a house and I want to own whatever. You want to shoot for an identity, and uh, that kind of lays out the work, right? The work
Hmm.
trajectory, like you're saying. And
Yep.
you said, I want to. I'm like paraphrasing or like
Hmm. Yep.
assuming that's what you said is I want to be the rocket ship builder of the mind,
Hmm.
right? Like that's my goal, and I'd like to just unpack that. Like like okay, you're building Weave right now, which is kind of a lot of people spend at least an hour a day, sometimes more on Twitter, right?
Hmm.
And if their feed is well curated, it's an hour of just insights and news,
Hmm.
and it's like just all this knowledge just like hitting you at like rapid speed,
Yep.
at scroll speed.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
and you bookmark to kind of give you that feeling of, okay, I'm gonna come back to this, but you
Hmm.
never come back to this, and you're kind of
Yep.
resurfacing that or activating it, or like your
Hmm.
goal is to activate that. But that's
Yep.
just that 1 hour a day, right? What does the full rocket, like let's say that's just whatever, like a part in the rocket ship, but
Hmm.
what is the full rocket ship from? And I also understand that, yeah, a goal might limit you if you think of it like that, like it's my
Hmm.
only goal. But
Yep.
shooting for a goal, it's just an orienting exercise. It's not a end
Yeah.
all be all thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think the goal for Weave is that it's the other 23 hours as well. It's not just that one. That one is where you're almost like the captain of the ship for that hour, but the ship is still running for the other 23. And I my kind of grand like goal, if I was to set one for Weave, is it's like way bigger than just Twitter bookmarks. It's just information. But I'm starting small to try and like nail the UX. But it's like feeds of information, podcasts, videos, articles, books, Twitter, whatever you want to add in. It's just streams in, and then there's this chat interface where you can like talk with it, but that's like quite a thin sliver. That's more where you're training your team. Let's say the team is the Weave agents, how to think about the problems that you care about. Like these are the things that I care about, maybe these brand mentions or any tips about SEO I want to care about or things that relate to something that I've been talking about. And it's like constantly picking through all of these things. And then as information's coming through, it's filtering and triggering work according to that. So like a
Mhm.
short-term idea that I have is creating a daily newsletter that kind of like creates an engaging and playful summary of the things that you've bookmarked,
Love it.
so that you can bookmark things as you go, and you don't have to think too deeply about them in the moment. You're just like that could be useful, and you bookmark it, and then you just get this kind of daily email that summarizes in a playful and engaging way what you've seen, and that's adding a bit more momentum to the bookmarks. The bookmarks now become this source of like additional sparks of thought in your day when you just scroll for 5 minutes on this email. And then there's just so many other things you can build on top of that that has this like orchestra of assistants running for you constantly, doing different tasks and different things, researching different topics and all sorts of things like that, pushing information into different places. And it's like a team that's running for you constantly. And that's where I envisage this rocket ship. And that hour is just you putting in the groundwork. You're managing the team in that time and giving it information. And then it's just running for you constantly. So it can almost act like a full team
I
doing
love it.
SEO for you or whatever. That's the big vision. Short term, it's just like chat with your bookmarks and but that's the seed.
Yeah, no, I,
And
I love it. It's like
hopefully it grows from there.
the kind of like your knowledge base. You said it great on your website, right? Like what was your headline? You used a really cool word, like
I said, I
knowledge
think knowledge
engine or
engine.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah, knowledge
I
engine.
think I said knowledge engine. Yeah.
Yeah, knowledge engine is such a good. If that's not trademark, yeah.
Hmm.
You should go get that trademark
Yeah, I should.
because it's such a good encapsulation of this idea, right? Like you're
Hmm.
building the new knowledge engine, right? Like
Hmm.
what you feed it and you build it kind of however you want, right? And it goes across disciplines, whatever you're interested in, right?
Exactly. That's the goal. Like I would love for technical people to be able to use it. I think it's kind of easier for them because there's just a lot more obvious content that you can give them. But there's also these other cohorts of people, like some of my best friends are like artists and designers, and they're bookmarking things, but not in the same way. Like I'm bookmarking things because it's like marketing ideas or
Mm-hmm.
like particular technical ideas or papers to read or something like that. But they're bookmarking things that are just like design inspiration or like different things that they notice that just sparks like something creative in them, like color palette or a texture or whatever it is that, or even just something that just evokes something in them. And they're bookmarking that, and it's like that's an interesting problem to try and tackle because that's a completely different problem space to the typical like how do I do
Yeah.
SEO? And it's like here's tweets about SEO. There you go. It's kind of easy. Let's talk about it. But it's much harder when it's much more viscerally emotional that they're trying to connect to it. But they still want to go back and say, how do I like how can I remember those textures that I saw or whatever, or just some way of surfacing it to them that allows for serendipity and they can re-spark those sparks
Mhm.
and make connections that they wouldn't have otherwise made.
No, it's fun because you also do the prompt, like the note prompt, uh, at bookmark time, which is great because for stuff like that, visual stuff and whatever, like you can't even remember the context. But if you kind of do the
Hmm.
prompt and you do all of that, and
Yeah.
then maybe you incorporate some sort of uh like deciphering agent, that can see the whatever it is and decipher it technically so that you can kind of use language to it's just such.
Hmm.
And then also building that engine that is so flexible, and I'm pretty sure that's a software puzzle that is also extremely exciting to just tackle, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I find it so interesting. Like I genuinely just love building. And I would be building this stuff whether people were using it or not. The only
Nice.
problem is I would run out of money, so I have to do
Yeah.
something about that. But I do genuinely just love it.
Yeah, the business is also an abstraction, right? Like it's an abstraction of what people like, what pains they're feeling and all of that. So it's un incorporating that into your data model or your, you know, vision of the world is
Hmm.
is helpful to kind of guide
Yeah,
you in the
for
right
sure.
direction,
Absolutely.
right? Um, okay, so let's say you've built it. Okay, let's just
Yep.
skip past
Okay.
this whole phase. Okay, imagine that you've built this engine and it's fully functional. You can tap
Hmm.
my Kindle, everything, like every way I consume information. I can
Hmm.
bookmark pieces I love, and
Yep.
it's, you know, in this platform. And, there's also, agents that you can hire. I don't know if you saw My First Million with Dharmesh recently. If not,
No,
check it
I
out.
haven't.
Yeah, if not, check it out. It's a podcast, and
Hmm.
if you're unfamiliar with the podcast, and Dharmesh is the CTO
Yeah,
of
no, I do
HubSpot.
like Dharmesh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's building like the LinkedIn for AI,
Hmm.
which is, even if it doesn't succeed, it's just a great metaphor, right? Like that
Yeah,
AI is
absolutely.
is employees and they have reviews and work experience and all of that, and like that's just a great metaphor for this like AI agent, right?
Hmm.
So let's say you have that, you have
Yep.
the knowledge platform, and then you can integrate it with whatever agent you like and create workflows from that knowledge base.
Hmm.
That's built, right?
Yep.
And you're there, you're peak impact. What is what are the opportunities you want to attract at that moment in time? Like, what would be the best phone call you can get saying like, hey, Adrian, let's go collaborate on this project? Like, what would that phone call?
Good question. Um, I think I think for me, like one of the overarching themes of a lot of the things that I've done has been education. Um, like I really care deeply about educating people, like making sure that people are well educated, like that they're curious, and that's part of education that I think gets missed in a lot of like my schooling for sure, is that it's boiled down to just raw information, but it's not about just remember these things. That's not what education is. It's about cultivating curious minds that want to solve difficult problems and have the skills to solve those problems. And I think if I was at peak impact with this kind of knowledge engine where I had this uh, system that really works and drives a lot of value, doing something with that that would help speed up the proliferation of like high level education to anybody who wants it in a way that's acknowledges the way that humans actually learn and the way that humans actually operate and the way curiosity works and things like that. And just trying to build tools around that. Like how can we build bespoke education for individuals, like an agent that learns that individual's tendencies, the things that spark them, the analogies that they understand, the forms of thinking that they're curious about, and then really tries to lean into that and give them the best experience they can. And I think in some way this might be related to what you were speaking with Dennis last week or the last whenever that was that you did
Mm,
that he was talking about like building this model of humans, like
mm,
building like figuring out enough data that you could like model human behavior in a useful way. And I think that that's related to this. Like if we could get to a scale of AI system that could really understand who it's speaking to, and
mm.
how do you optimally communicate for that individual, and that seems like it's not obvious to me that that wouldn't be possible. Like it seems like it should be possible, but we just need more data. We need more infrastructure. We need more intelligent systems. And if we had this thing that could just ingest all this information and really parse through it and work with it collaboratively, feels like a part of making that system good requires you to solve the education problem to some degree. And I think that would be the thing that would excite me most.
I love it. Sounds great. What is your proudest moment?
Mm. Um, I suppose there's two that come to mind. Um, one is when I realized, so I always wanted to build things, like ever since I was a kid. I've always loved building things. I was building things out of wood and like Legos and stuff, and then I would like build electronics and just I've always loved building things. And then I decided to build software for a living, and I started writing code, and I sucked, like everybody does when they start, right? It's really difficult. You don't understand anything, and it's just incomprehensible. Like I remember learning if statements and stuff, and then seeing Microsoft Word, and I was like, this is software. And the thing that I've been learning is not this. Like, what the hell is this? Like, how has somebody built this? This is
Yeah.
crazy. And all I'm learning is these if statements. Like, how do like the gap between where I was at and where I
Mm,
knew had to exist because I could see these tools was enormous. I literally had
mm,
no idea how you could bridge that gap. And I just kept grinding. And years later, I had this realization one day that I'm like, holy shit, like I actually understand this stuff. Like I could explain to you how you could build Microsoft Word now, like from scratch. I could explain it. It would take a fucking long time to explain, but I
yeah.
could do it. I understand the moving pieces
Mm,
of almost the whole stack, right? Because
mm,
I studied electronic engineering, so I came at it from the computer level,
mm.
and then I learned software after that, and
That's awesome.
that was like professionally, that was definitely my proudest moment where I realized that all of this hard work that I'd put in, all of this diligence of like actually turning up when I didn't feel like it and trying to learn every day and build as many things as I could and suck at building for a long time and try to get jobs and do all this stuff. And I was just almost mindlessly on this journey to get good. And then one day I had this like overwhelming realization I'd got to the place that I wanted to be
Uh,
in that I I fully believe that I can build whatever I want now. Like
Amazing.
it's just a question of time.
Hmm.
Like maybe it might take me 25 years to build it, but I could set on the journey and figure out a path that I could start chipping away at the problem. And that was like a very empowering feeling of like I've made it to the place that I always wanted to be, that I have this freedom of expression and building. And that was a very proud moment for me
It's
when I had that
beautiful. Yeah, no,
realization.
it's a fantastic moment, right? Because it's like I'm pretty sure in between those two moments, right? Like I don't know how the hell this piece of software was built to the moment I can build whatever I want. There was like tons of doubt in
Oh,
between
for
those
sure. Yeah.
moments.
I mean,
Like,
there still is, right? There still
yeah,
is every day. There's still doubt.
yeah, yeah.
That I think that I'm just overconfident and I don't actually know what I'm doing. I still have
Mm,
days like that for sure. But
mm,
yeah, the loads of times over that period of time
mm,
where I was just like, I'm never going to get this. This is so
yeah,
difficult. There's stuff that these other people seem to really understand
mm.
and it's easy for them. And it's just magic to me. I don't understand any of this, but you just keep going. And one day you kind of just understand. You don't really know how it just happened.
I love it. No, it's great. So you said you had two moments. So that's one moment. What's the other moment?
Yeah, so that was kind of like my professional most proudest moment, I suppose. And then the other one that came to mind was just when there came a point in, so my parents growing up like weren't very well off, like we're fairly working class family, and they hardworking people, but we just never had that much money. And then I went off and studied software and stuff, and then I landed like a really well-paying job in Silicon Valley. And shortly after that, some things happened and my parents required some money and they were like really stressed about it. And I just like I'd been working at this company for a few months and I had like quite a lot saved up
Hmm.
in that time because I was
Uh,
like getting paid pretty well and I
mm,
was able to just give them that money.
amazing.
And that was like that was an incredible moment for me just because I have this real gratitude towards my parents because they always encourage my curiosity and I've always felt like that's my strongest feature. Like it's my the thing that I'm best at in life stems from that curiosity, and my parents encouraged it. Where a lot of parents didn't, they shut it down, and they would say, "Don't think about that stuff." And I would just make up stories, and my
Mm,
parents would run with them, and I would
hmm.
just like
Amazing.
invent things. My parents would run with it, and I'd try to pull apart like a radio, and then try to pull it like figure out how it worked, and I could
Mm,
never put it back together. And they would never shout at me for it. They would
mm,
encourage me to do it. And that ultimately led to who I became. And they sacrificed a lot to get me there. And
uh,
um, just being able to give back in that small way that, like, obviously it's financial, which is like
mm,
they give so much more than that. And I don't want to
mm,
boil down my relationship to just that, but just being able to solve that problem for them in
mm.
that moment was like a real joyous experience to be like, I've developed myself to the point where I'm now able to give back to the
Amazing.
people that have given me everything. And that was, yeah, a
No, that's
very
great.
touching
It's
moment.
fantastic story. What is your story? Speaking of stories.
Um, so, uh, I grew up in South Africa.
Mhm.
Um, and then my parents moved to Ireland and I moved with them. And my dad was a carpenter. So he was always building things in wood. And my favorite thing to do as a kid was just sit and watch him build things. And he would give me little offcuts of wood and stuff, and I would build little bits and pieces. And I just always enjoyed that. And as I grew up, I just always built things. I always knew I wanted to build things. Went to uni and studied electronic engineering. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do electronics, and I ended up getting a job in the industry
Mm.
and kind of hated it. But I didn't hate the work. I loved the work. I hated the environment. I hated the
Okay.
work culture, and I hate it was just a very, very, very big company that had a lot of employees, and everyone was just a cog, and everything was bureaucracy and moved very slowly. And I was quite disillusioned about everything at that point in my life because I thought that was it. I was just stuck in this corporate hell forever. This is what a job is.
It's like
Um,
Office Space.
yeah, it was awful, like an open plan office, just absolutely terrible. I really, really hated it. I had a lab, fortunately, but
Mm,
so I would disappear to that and try and
mm,
work in there because it was like a more fun environment. But it was still just like to get anything done, it was just awful. You had to go through so many hoops of bureaucracy to get anything done, and I hated it. And at that point, I quit
mm,
and I just vowed that I'm going to do this on my own. Like I just can't do that. It doesn't matter how difficult it is. I have to do it on my own because I have to do it on my terms. And by that, I didn't mean necessarily I have to do it all on my own, but I have to do it on my terms. So, like, if I'm going to work in a company, I want to be able to have the autonomy to work on the things that I want to work on. Not necessarily like I'm not fuck you, I'm going to do my own thing
yeah,
in this company, but like
but
I want some
fulfilling
creative
things.
freedoms, right? I want
Mm,
some autonomy and some creative freedoms, and uh, so I thought at that point in my life, the only way to do that was to just do it myself.
mm,
And so I started doing that, and that's when I started the YouTube thing. So I figured that I could maybe make something of that. So I started learning to code by making YouTube videos about coding.
mm,
That was my motivation to continue to learn myself. Was I have to stay one step ahead if I'm teaching this content, and that has been a hack for my whole life. Really, I teach things to try and learn them, which is, I suppose, the education piece. And yeah, just learned software that way, and then ended up getting a job from that in software. And that was when I realized that not all jobs were like the corporate hell that I'd
mm.
experienced, because I was now working at this like small, fast-moving software company where there was no rules. It was just we're building some things. If you can build, hop on, let's go. And that was like that was the moment that I realized I'd found my calling. Like that was software. I'm like, this is it. This is the culture that I love. This is I'm getting to do the thing that excites me. I've got autonomy doing it. I can travel with a laptop and still work. It's like it's got everything, and I love every piece of it. So I'm gonna do it, and it's like never look back from there, really.
Amazing. I love it. And if I can almost guess this, but I just want to hear it from you. What are your superpowers?
Um, I think I actually think my biggest superpower is finding connections between disparate things. Um, I'm just really curious about a lot of things, and I'm not actually like that much of an expert at any one of them to like a large degree. There's a lot of people that know like most bits of software better than me. There's people that know like React better than me for sure. There's people that know like the AI stack better than me. They know how to build like transformers, or they do RAG applications or whatever. They know how to build operating systems. I know little bits of pieces about all of it, but I don't
Mm,
know. I'm not a very deep, knowledgeable individual about any one of them, but I know a little bit about a lot, which kind of makes me a jack of all trades. But my real skill is finding the connections between the things and seeing the bigger picture of how these things can come together, and then kind of trying to piece together the good work other people have done.
So
So
it's
I'm not very
abstract
good at
thinking,
just,
like abstractions.
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
It's like build like thinking in abstractions is definitely my biggest strength. And finding those connections, letting the experts build the things that they're expert in, and then I can kind of piece them together into novel ways and
mm.
find the next steps in that journey, I think.
I like that a lot. Uh, it ties into like software engineering, right? Because it's like you find these packages and whatever that
Exactly.
people have perfected or spent some like uh, like with my thing, I'm like looking into spell check and like dictionaries and whatever, and like there's
Mhm.
like Hunspell and all, like
Yeah,
people have spent,
it's crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's
and you can
again
just
like
use it.
one of the things I love about software is like that the community around it, the kind of person who wants to write software believes in the same ideals that I believe in. So it's really aligned. Like there's so many people in software that believe that it's a good thing to spend a lot of time building something and then give it to the world for free because the world deserves to have it, because you get benefit from other people's things And if we all do that, it's like this kind of utopian ideal that software engineers have, but somehow they've kind of managed to scale it into something that runs the whole world effectively. And you can just download other people's code and run it and build
Yeah.
on top of it and add things to it. It's incredible that if you had to build spell check from the ground up every time you had to build an app that needed spell check, we're never going to make any progress. Somebody else did it, gave it to the world, you use it, and then you can make progress, and then maybe somebody else who uses your stuff later, and we all move faster.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that about software. And
Me
yeah.
too. I like that, like when like it's developer first, where it's like, hey, we'll give it free to developers, but if you want to start selling it to your customers, then there's like
Exactly.
some sort of licensing and whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it's so cool. Yeah. Like I love developer first companies, like Superbase and all these like amazing
Hmm.
companies that are like, hey, use it, have fun with it. Once you get big, we'll get a small cut. It's
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. I think it's
like,
really fair as well. It's
yeah.
I have no issues paying for a lot of these products because they're just great products. And yes, I could self-host them,
Mhm.
but
Right. Yeah.
I why bother when they're just doing a great service? And there's a lot of companies, like one that really comes to mind is Post Hog.
Mhm.
Um, like they're just from what I can see from the outside, they just seem like a ridiculously amazing company. The way that their company culture runs and the way that they're super transparent about everything, and then they're doing the same thing where it's like, here's our software, you can just use it. If you want to self-host this is free. Just like stick it on the server and you can use it. But we also host it and you can pay us to do that, and then you don't have to worry about it. And their pricing is really fair.
Mhm.
And that trend is amazing. I love that trend. Like there's loads of companies that are doing that now where it's like, if you want to self-host this, go ahead because
Yeah.
the software is not our product. The product is the convenience of the whole package.
Mhm.
And if you don't need that convenience, you just want the software, you go ahead, you can use it. But if you want that convenience, which most people do,
Yeah.
and that I think there's a deep insight there that like your software is not the product is the convenience, and people will pay for it even if they can get hold of the software. So you
That's a
might as well.
very good distinction. That the convenience is what people pay for, right? Because it's both ways. It's the ways you're talking about it right now, and then there's also, hey, I built something that to me is trivial because I'm a
Mhm.
programmer, right? Like, and it's like, wow, whatever. It's easy. I did it in a day. But it's so convenient what you built in a day that you can't like it justifies a portion of your pricing, to the customer when
For
when you
sure.
say, hey, I have this feature, they're like, amazing, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
All right. Who are you serving? Like if we're now gonna drill into this iteration, right? Which is we,
mhm.
uh, who are you serving?
I think I'm serving me and people
Mhm.
like me. Um, and intuitively, I think that's always been how I've always looked at the world. And things that I build is that I chase excitement. Like if an idea is exciting to me, I tend to want to pursue it. It's the biggest heuristic for me in life that I'll tend to, if I'm stuck at a crossroads and I don't know what to do, I'll tend to optimize for the thing that makes me most excited. And I've always built with that in mind. So that implicitly, because of that, I'm building for me because my my green flag to go is my own emotional thing that I don't necessarily know why I've got that, but I have, and that's a real signal. And if I'm feeling it, then there must be something there, and maybe other people resonate with that as well. And then to kind of rationalize that whole thing, I think building for myself and people like me is the only thing I can realistically do because it's the only thing that I truly know is like what I think. I can't guess what you think. Um,
100%. No, I agree with you. But if you are a part of a community, right? Like who are we? Like,
so we are curious, curious people at their core. Curious people who want to move quicker, who want to get more done, who want to learn more, who want to fit more work into the day, more. like work however they define it. Just want to fit more stuff into their day. Um, they want to move through their work quicker. They want to get to their goals quicker, whatever. Um, People who have that drive, because there's a lot of people that are okay with learning stuff sporadically. But then there's type A people who are curious and they have this insatiable appetite for just learning and moving and making progress. I think that's really the target for Weave. It's not really going to be a casual, I log on to Twitter once a week and like browse for 10 minutes and bookmarks and things. It's like my target is really the kind of person who is reading constantly, the kind of person who's listening to podcasts, who's trying to soak up information, who's building, who's got their own thoughts and they're trying to synthesize all of that. The people who are like kind of chaotically moving all the time, that's that's going to be the core audience for me because those are the people that understand the value prop of what I'm trying to put forward. Because I think because I've told the idea of Weave to some of my friends and they're like, I don't understand. Like I didn't know people did that on Twitter.
That's so funny.
And I'm like, that's fair enough. Like you're not my target audience, but there are people, trust me, that are like that. They have this insatiable desire to learn and progress, and like those are my people, and they're the target for Weave for sure.
And where would you find them? Like if
I
you're
mean,
going to think
historically,
about
I've
communities,
found them.
groups, what?
I've found them generally in my life through the kind of person I'm targeting. I've found through technical interests, um, which
Like what?
like so just going to like a meetup, for example, like a tech meetup. There's like if you go to like an AI like ML meetup or something, there's a particular demographic of people that
Uh,
show up there, and that self-selects for a lot more of that kind of type A voracious appetite person because they turned up to a thing that's exclusively there for information, right?
hell
So
yeah.
it self-selects for that kind of person. But I think like recently and an obvious target for Weave would be Twitter users who are online every day, the kind of people who are posting regularly and who are talking about the same kind of topics every day because those are the kind of people who want to learn because I think they're putting information out into the world and they're trying to progress their own careers and their own personal brands and their own products. So those people I think will disproportionately be people who care for consumption of information and leveraging information in a useful way.
I like the first market better, to be honest. The technology meetup people, like if you go to like conferences and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I'd like that market too, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a like I didn't even think of that, but I like it a lot. And who are our heroes? Like these people,
Um, I think it depends on like what's the motivation behind the action. So there's some people that consume information and really try to move forward and progress for the sake of the information, because they just enjoy the process of learning. And I think I'm one of those people. I just love learning. And for me, like um, my heroes are people that are just authentically creating whatever they want because you can tell when somebody's doing something because they think this is lucrative or from people that you can tell that they're just doing this because they love it. Um, and there's that those are like the kinds of heroes that I have. So like the kind of canonical examples would be people like Nikola Tesla, who
Mhm.
was broke. He died broke, but he invented some of the most ridiculous things that humanity has ever invented. Um, Clearly not motivated exclusively by money, but he just wanted to build cool things. And like that's kind of a cliche example, I suppose, for tech people, but it's true. Like that guy's a legend for a good reason. And yeah, people like Steve Jobs, I suppose, with the book behind you. He had like
Yeah,
this very unbelievable vision of who he was and what he wanted to create in the world. And he like dogmatically brought it into existence because he thought it needed to exist, not because he thought that people thought it should exist. He wanted it to exist and he made it happen. Those kind of people are my hero. But then I think there's another cohort of people that are doing this like information consumption because it's a means to an end for them, and the end is financial. Usually, it's like this is just a way to get ahead in life, and I have nothing against that because you're still producing value, and that's all that really matters. Your motivations are kind of not that relevant to me as long as you're not causing harm. And I think those people have very different heroes. I'm not really sure exactly who they would be, but I think maybe like more kind of business minded, like financial minds that those people would lean towards that they would judge a person's success not by the authenticity of the creation, but by the amount of money created by it. And that resonates with me less personally, but
Me
I'm
too.
sure there's some other
I
people.
like what you're doing here with the technical interest. So let me just explain what just happened. Um, like the last four questions, right? So the who are you
Hmm.
serving kind of makes you think about like that kind of, you know, psychographics, I guess. Who's, what are they doing? And then I was trying to get you from a concept of a customer to actual people and where you'd meet them, right? Like I posted this post today or yesterday that a target customer is not a target market, right? A
Hmm.
target customer is like a profile. It's like what you use to
Yeah.
build your product or build your brand. But a
Hmm.
target market is a group of people that you can find them somewhere.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's much more useful for marketing than a target customer.
Yeah.
You know
That
what I
makes
mean?
sense. Yeah.
So and zeroing in on who those people are, I think is extremely useful in terms of your roadmap and whatever. Because right now you have these like I'm just gonna call them like tech bros, like nerds, people who love knowledge, right? And creation, and they're fat. Like that's like you said, an entirely different situation than someone who just wants to consume all the viral stuff and then make it into some sort of template so that they can sell. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm. Yeah,
it's
for
two
sure.
different, and you're solving for two different problems there. So I would stick to the Nikola Tesla, Steve Jobs type people rather than whatever
Yeah,
Alex Hormozi or
definitely.
whatever,
Yeah, for sure.
those kind of situations. So thinking about those people, right? They're going to conferences, they're trying to like just absorb knowledge, right? What are their pain points?
Um, I think decision fatigue is a big one. Um, I've definitely felt that for myself, that it's easy to it's easy to position yourself in a way that you are inundated with information. Like finding the information is not difficult, um, especially today. If you curate some decent lists on Twitter, and you can have like some world-class opinions on your feed every single day. Um, Actually curating that information is fairly easy. You can like find some podcasts, whatever you want to do. Find your favorite blogs, YouTube channels, whatever. Um, but then that information is coming at you, and you now have to do something with it. Just having it hit you in the face is not useful. You have to figure out how to do something with it, and with that comes like the snowball effect of decision fatigue, where you have to now decide what to do with every piece of information that comes at you. And then maybe you have to decide on a whole system that handles that information. And that's like most people won't even get to that point where they have actually defined a system of how they
Mhm.
ingest information into their life. Most people haven't done that. And
Yeah,
the ones that have probably spent like an inordinate amount of time actually doing it.
yeah,
And there's still decision fatigue there because they're constantly updating the system rather than actually using the system. And
yeah,
now we've got this whole situation that creates anxiety in almost everyone, both the people not using a system and the people using a system, because there's so much decision fatigue built into the systems, whether you have them or not. And that's just a function of the nature of the information coming at you. There's so much of it
yeah.
that the density of like information, the kind of entropy in that information is so high that there's absolutely going to be some form of decision fatigue there
Mhm.
if you have to think about all of that yourself.
Mhm.
So I think a big part of what I'm thinking about with Weave is that how can I automate out a lot of that decision fatigue for you
Mhm.
and allow you to just be the creative spark. Like you should just be able to sit down, be presented with sort of like some information in a way that's already pre-processed for you, and then you can just riff on it. And then you riff
Mhm.
on it for however long you want, and then you can walk away, and the system continues churning on that, and it reduces the decision fatigue. And now you can start to scale up the ingestion of information. And that's where we really get into the rocket ship because now we're kind of limited. There's a ceiling to how much information we can ingest because of the inherent decision fatigue around that. But if we can diminish that decision fatigue, we can scale the information up, and then we can really, really make better decisions faster.
I love it. No, it's like what came to me is like you're automating the creative inspiration almost, right? Like, because you're like learning what inspires these people and then ingesting it
Yeah,
all, making sense out of it, and then resurfacing it in a way that is
exactly. Yeah.
gonna
Like I would almost
propel them.
frame it like I think you're spot on, but I would frame it slightly differently, which is it's automated serendipity. It's
Mhm.
like it's not necessarily automating the creativity. You're still doing that, but it's presenting you the opportunity for you to find that creative spark by presenting information in a new way. Because if you found it on your feed and you scroll your feed and whatever, and you found it in context, and quite often I find like whatever the previous few tweets were has just primed my mind into a
Mhm.
particular space. And then when I see the next tweet, that headspace is impacting the way that I perceive that tweet.
Mhm.
And that can spark ideas because then, like, I've just heard this tweet about AI automation, and now I'm reading a tweet about like SEO,
Mhm.
and suddenly, like, my mind might be primed to think about agents for SEO. And the serendipity in that process, and trying to find a way where I can take that and synthesize that into an experience where I can reliably create that kind of serendipity by learning what kind of things do you like to connect? What kind of
Mhm.
things do you really know? Like these are really difficult problems. I don't know how to solve them yet, but like this is where my
Yeah.
mind is going and having the feed. So you have that natural serendipity of a feed, but then also have this agent that can like drop things into the conversation. It's like, hey, remember that thing we were speaking about last week? That might be cool. And you just drop that in there, and then that creates like thought bombs in the individual who's using it. And if I could get to a point where I could automate that reliably and create those kind of moments for people, one, I think Weave blows up because like that's a really cool thing. Like that'd be super useful. But two, like that would really get across the point that that's what I'm trying to build. Like something that sparks that kind of joy in the creative
You know what
process. And
you reminded me of? Uh, just like as a sidebar. You like Mitch Hedberg, the
yeah.
comedian? So he's like my dream was to be a race car passenger, you know, where I just bug the driver and that would be cool if we was just a race car passenger, like as just comes out like, bro,
Yeah.
remember this?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah. All right. So what is the magic trick? And how I define the magic trick, it's that like before and after slider that is just so instant and you just show it to someone and then they're like, wow, that's amazing. I need that. You know, the best example, I can show you if you have a computer is Magnific.ai. They have that
Hmm.
like little slider where it's like, it's like computer enhanced and it is exactly like that. They put a
Yeah.
blurry photo, you do the slider and it's just amazing detail, right? And then they
Hmm.
have more and more. Like they just keep doing that magic trick throughout the the website, hoping you buy. Um, so what is that for Weave?
Hmm. Um, that's a good question. And it's something I've kind of been pondering a little bit, but I don't think it's exactly what you're asking. Um, uh, the truth is I don't know what that magic trick is in as succinct way as what they do with the slider, right? That's like really clean. It's so in your face. It's right there. I think the weave thing is just takes a little bit more to experience the kind of magic of what Weave is trying to do. I think you can't explain it to people in words because
You can,
it'll
you
just
can. We
it
let's
doesn't
do it together. Let's get to the magic trick together. So, what is like, let's say, the most immediate impact that you get, right? Uh,
So the way that I've been thinking about this, so to kind of back up a little bit of where I'm coming from, to think about the magic of other things that I've experienced as a user, and then that's where I'm coming from for
yeah,
trying
that's
to think about Weave. So with AI specifically, I've had a few moments over the last like 18 months that have really like hit me in a like a visceral like, oh shit, like this is a this is a new thing that's really cool.
mm,
Um, one of them was Claude artifacts,
mm,
where you could type things and like it would just pop open in the side, and suddenly I was seeing the HTML that I asked for being rendered, or
mm,
like the code running, and there's like fairly useful app. That was like, oh God, this is crazy. That was like a huge moment. Another one was V0, where there's this like, again,
yeah,
it's
the
kind of a
UI is generated. Yeah.
the UI is generating as you're going, and you can scroll and it's buttons like that was crazy for me. Um, and those kind of moments that like the magic for me and all of the ones that I've experienced myself has always been coming at like almost like blurring the line between you and the LLM,
Mm,
where like if you go to ChatGPT, like OG ChatGPT,
mm,
or even thinking further back before ChatGPT, where there was just like the GPT-3 playground,
mm,
there's quite a lot of space between you and the model. Like there's input
mm,
boxes for like user
mm,
assistant, and then you've got to type in there and you've got to craft
mm,
this thing, and it's like, and then if you need to explain anything, like it all has to be in the prompt. You have to
mm,
write it all out because the model knows nothing about your world.
mm,
So there's this huge amount of distance between you and the model. And then V0 comes along and squashes that distance quite a lot because now
mm,
you can ask for things and it understands the context and it just puts it right next to it. So now it's
mm,
seeing what you're seeing because it made it. And then you can ask for modifications and you're suddenly much more immersed in the experience because the LLM suddenly has more context of your world
mm,
and that you don't have to explain anymore because it's integrated itself into that world in some way. And every time I've experienced this, oh shit, like this is crazy magical moment, has always been somewhere in that space where the model is closer to me. And that's been
mm,
a big driver of the motivation for Weave, is that I want that experience, like the experience of using Cursor for the first time as a developer.
mm,
And you're like, oh my God, like this is crazy that it can just write code for me and I can just
mm,
highlight code and just like almost write a comment for it and it just fixes the code.
mm.
And again, that's like bringing you closer to the model. The model now has more context of your world, and the magic is in that bridging that
But
gap.
there's a demonstration there.
So
In
we've,
all your examples, there's a demonstration video that I can show you, five
yeah,
seconds, 10
and
seconds.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
kind of getting to with
Mm,
what I've built an onboarding experience for Weave, and
yeah.
my goal was exactly how do I get the user to the aha moment as quickly as possible? How do I get them to experience what Weave has to offer rather than just telling them what it has to
Mm,
offer? Getting them to scroll the feed and feel that using cursor for the first time moment. But how can I give that to people that are non-technical who just do regular knowledge work rather than necessarily technical people who write code? How can I give those people the cursor moment of like, oh, this is mad, this is crazy
yeah,
that I can
you
do
tweeted
this?
about it. It was a banger. Like, I still think about that tweet where
Which one was
you were
that?
like, you tweeted something like you were like the onboarding experience should be as magic. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you
Okay, I remember
encapsulated
that
this
one.
idea in a tweet, and I love
Yeah,
that tweet. And
yeah.
like, have you figured it out yet or not?
Um, so I've got something. I don't think I've really properly figured it out, but I'm gonna like put it out on Monday anyway and just
Yeah.
see what people think. But yeah, what I'm trying to do in that onboarding experience is bring in the actual bookmarks that you've got on your account. So it's not fake information. It's not like some random getting started guide. It's like this is your real bookmarks, and then it will try and guide you through a conversation that touches all of the main points of how Weave works. So you can do searching of your bookmarks, you can do searching by authors, you can discuss the ideas, you can ask for like, how can I implement this in my own workflows? And it can give you that and trying to guide you through that in a few minutes. Like going from I've just signed up to Weave and I've just had a few text message back and forths with the agent, and I've now experienced what Weave has to offer. I've seen what it
I
feels
think,
like to just scroll the feed and then
yeah,
just speak and have it just understand.
I think creating a more controlled environment would be better for you because you're assuming people have bookmarks, like
Well, yeah, I
on
am
Twitter,
assuming that. Yeah.
and it's
I mean, initially, I'm not sure how many people want to sign up for Weave who don't already have bookmarks.
that's what I'm getting at is that you'd be surprised because bookmarks might be useless to some people. They might have that idea that you built
Okay.
this software from. You're like, I'm bookmarking all this stuff. I'm never going to look at it. Some people
Okay.
might just give up on bookmark. They're
Okay.
like,
So you're saying that there's almost like a dormant demographic who would, in theory, use the product,
mhm,
but have never actually used bookmarks because they just knew that it was frivolous in the first
exactly.
place. Okay.
And
Yeah, that makes
um,
sense. Yeah, I
yeah,
agree with that.
and there's also the note-taking aspect. There's so many things that whatever that if I were you, I would make this a very targeted, almost like how in a video game you kind of play. Uh, I don't know if you play video games or you like video games, but there was this video game called Prototype. It was
Okay.
one of my favorite video games. It never, I don't think it got popular or whatever, but you started level one, you had all the superpowers, right? You had
Hmm.
everything, and they walk you through it and teach you with full superpowers. So it's almost like that controlled environment makes it extremely exciting. So if I were you, I'd create like some mock Twitter feed and have them go and bookmark and teach them how to do it, right?
Okay.
And then show
That's
them,
interesting.
you know, the end goal and what you can do with that because it's also controlled. You can control that entire experience, you know,
I
and
like that. Yeah.
yeah,
I hadn't thought about that, like integration like that, where you actually do a mock feed. But yeah, that's actually really magical. I love that.
mm,
Thank you.
because and then you can just video yourself going through that as a demo, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
and
no,
they
I
go
really
through,
like that.
yeah,
I think I'll run with that. I'll still like launch what I've got, just get some users, but I think I will. I'll definitely deeply ponder that because that's really interesting idea.
yeah,
Because
no, it's
it is something I've wrestled with a lot because I do like that tweet that I put out, and I do really care about. Again, it's like this gap in between like there is something magical about the idea behind Weave. I don't know if I've captured it, but I'm very confident that there is something magical there. Um, so there's that. But then there's also drop somebody into like the interface where it's like there's a feed and a chatbot. They're not going to experience the magic. It's just overwhelming. It's like, what the hell do I ask? Like, I don't know. Like,
mhm, yeah, exactly.
I'm going to scroll and like, I don't know. I'm going to think something.
Mhm.
How do I get to that point of like having a fluid interaction where you can really experience the magic? I've been thinking a lot about that, and I've kind of built this thing that tries to get at that. But I think what you just said is way better. Having a
All right.
feed where you can actually end to end guide them through the whole process and control the whole thing and know because you can really polish that then.
Yeah,
That's a lot better.
I love it. Okay. Uh, is there any competition you've seen that does this? Or-
Not really. So there's some tools that I found that do bookmark management.
Mhm.
So it allows you to create folders or things like that. Just like, and I've seen some open source, but no paid products that do chat with your bookmarks. Uh, but there's nothing that I've seen that's trying to do is more of an active participant. All of these are kind of passive consumption things. It's like search for your bookmarks, put them in folders, and chat
Chat
with
with them.
them.
Yeah.
I want to have much more of an active thing that's not just chat. It's actually it's bringing information to the table. It's remembering things about you. Like these things don't exist yet. Like right now, it is just chat with your bookmarks. It's like the most simple
But
version
the
of the
roadmap
product,
is completely different,
but
like for you.
but the roadmap is completely different. So I haven't seen ones that are similar to what I envisage it being, but there are some that are similar to where it at is at right now.
I like it. And the hero feature is like if you're gonna just pick one feature and talk about, what would that be?
I think it's the feed, the fact that you can the LLM knows what you're looking at. As you're scrolling, it can see what you're looking at, so you don't have to explain it. And that's the gap of bringing your world into the LLM a bit more. That's the cursor experience, and I think my intuition is that's where the magic is for people that they'll have. Because I speak with people who use like ChatGPT, for example, and they have issues with it. They say it's not as good as people say it is, or they're not
Yeah.
getting good results, or it never gives them the outputs that they want, or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it's clunky because you have to go to the interface and it knows nothing about what you want to do. Now you need to explain everything. There's a lot of work that goes into doing that well, and then you have to know about prompt engineering and how to get the best results out of it. Most people just don't know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I can build this like wrapper around it and use all my knowledge to make sure the prompts are really optimized and they're getting good results and they're flowing the things correctly, and it's putting the context that you would have typed out yourself into it. So it's really packaging that up for you, and then you can just chat with it and it just gives you the experience you expect it to give you rather than having to do all this extra stuff. That's what I want out of the product. That's what I'm trying to build towards. And
Let's kind of narrow that scope to just the see what you're looking at. Describe that. What do you mean it sees what you're looking
so as you're scrolling,
at? Mm-hmm.
there's a feed. So there's two windows. There's a chat window and there's a feed window. The feed
Mm-hmm.
window is pretty much just like your regular Twitter feed, and it's
Okay.
just a reverse chronological feed of the bookmarks that you've made recently. The idea is you can scroll through that, and there might be three, four, five tweets on the screen at any given time that you're looking at, and you can read them, and an idea sparks in your mind about one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, let's say if that was on Twitter, you could copy the content of that tweet, go over to ChatGPT, paste it in, and say, I was thinking this about this tweet, and I'm building this product, and I think this idea might relate to the product that I'm building. And you can
Mm-hmm.
explain all this stuff. But you have to do all this work just to get you to the point of asking the question that you wanted to ask. Like, how could I implement this for my project? I want to be able to to be able to just drop into the feed and just say, how do I implement what Greg has just said? Like, and
But the
it
Twitter feed
knows
or the Weave feed?
on the Weave feed.
And the Weave feed I create with my bookmarks.
Yeah, every time you bookmark something on
Ah,
Twitter, it automatically
I
goes
see
onto your
what you're
Weave
saying.
feed.
Okay, so it's yeah, it's like that automatic context of bookmark tweets.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is kind of like on the chopping block of questions. So I'm gonna test it out with you and see, if we get to somewhere good. All right. So there's levels of products, right? So at the product level, it's Weave, kind of the features of it, what it does, right?
Hmm.
What is the solution level? Like if you're going to describe what does it solve?
I think the ultimate product is save time. It delivers you more time to get the grunt work of what you want done. So most of your bookmarks are right now lost information. It's
Hmm.
stuff that you found that you thought in the moment would be interesting, and you just threw that to the side and forgot about it forever. The idea in the Weave world is you would bookmark it, it would now be ingested into this knowledge engine, and this knowledge engine can trigger things
Hmm.
that does real work for you. So that might be brainstorming ideas for tweets based on content that you've bookmarked about the things that you tweet about. It could be ideas for optimizing your landing page. It could be business strategy ideas. It could be technical things that you could implement. It could be new libraries that you find, whatever it is. And you have these pipelines that automate various tasks that you've defined. And then it's delivering you things at the end of that that save you time. So you can just log into Weave and it's going to show you some tweets that it's created and drop you into an experience to make them your own. And in 10 minutes of using that, you've produced a week's worth of content that
I
would have
love
taken you a full day otherwise. Or it's giving you actionable steps to implement a particular conversion optimization strategy or a new A/B testing thing. And it's giving you the tools. It's saying, hey, use this tool to do this. This is going to be the fastest route to get this done. And it's giving you the action steps. And then you have to go and do them. It can't do everything for you, but it's trying to deliver you to that last mile as quickly as possible so that you can now execute. And many things that you would have known in the past that you should do, but you just didn't have the time to sit down and do, those things are now within reach because it Weave is getting you to the last mile. So it's delivering you more value in less time is the
yeah.
ultimate thing.
Does it treat folders differently?
Um, so in the current version, it does sync your folders, um, but it does nothing with them right now. But I plan on doing something with them later. But yeah, right now it doesn't discriminate between folders. It just treats all of your bookmarks as one continuous feed and then just relies on its own search functionality for you to find things. And then the actual folders that you've defined will be integrated later, but
Hmm.
I haven't
Yeah,
figured out
because
what
the
to do with them yet.
folders seems like if you have multiple interests and you want to create multiple knowledge engines, would be a good way to kind of organize that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that. Yeah, I think that's very cool.
okay, so that's the solution, right? The solution is so the product is its features and whatever, and then the solution is uh, kind of saving time if you are going to go about uh, using that information. But before
Mhm.
that, it's actually making the bookmarks usable, right?
Mhm.
What is the lifestyle that enables?
I would hope that it allows people to do more of the creative thing that excites them. That goes after like targeting the kind of creative person, the Steve Jobs or the Nikola Tesla versus the Alex Hormozi, right? The
Mhm.
person who wants to create for the sake of creating. I want to get them to a point where they can spend more of their time doing that creation that they love to do and that they're good at and having to do less time on a lot of the other grunt work stuff. And this is to some degree a very selfish goal for me because that it's what I want for myself. Because I love nothing more than just sitting down and hacking on some code, building a cool project, like things that are not necessarily useful, maybe things that are useful. I don't know, just writing code. I just love it. But obviously, if you're going to run a business or work for a company at any degree, there's a lot of other things you have to do. A lot of the grunt work. You've got to write emails, you've got to do outreach, you've got to do research, you've got to figure out like all this other stuff, figure out like your taxation stuff for the company and like all sorts of other stuff around the thing that you love to do. I would
Mhm.
love to get people to the point where a lot of that stuff can be mostly automated, if
Yeah.
not entirely automated, so that you can free yourself up to spend an hour a day just making sure all these systems are right and that they're producing good output and that their things are working smoothly.
Mhm.
And then you know that they're just running. And then you can just go and do the thing that you really love to do, whatever that is.
I like. Uh, yeah. Maybe not the chopping block, but I need to tweak that because it goes on more. And it's like, oh, keep going. Anyway, so the next question is, what are the quality factors that uh, customers will judge this by? Like, what would make it like a great product? What is the quality factor?
So I mean, the obvious one is that they feel like it's delivering them value
But how do
in
you judge
some
that?
like
What like?
abstract sense. Yeah, well, I think that's my problem, not theirs, right? It's like I have to think about how to judge that. I don't think they are necessarily. It's just they have this qualitative feeling of this is doing value. And I think that comes down to is it actually useful, but also the psychological things in the UX of how it feels to use. How buttery smooth is the flow through the app and does it feel like I'm making progress? I think that's a big part of giving them that perception. But in
But
terms of like how
yeah,
do I
but
actually
think about it,
define
the
what that
subconscious,
means?
like
Like I
even the subconscious indicators, like maybe they can't name them, but you said buttery smooth UX, right? Like things work, things flow.
Mhm.
But what
I
else?
think
Like,
like preempting things. I think that a big part for me when I've experienced magic is it's felt like the LLM understood in a deeper way than I expected it to. It didn't just answer my question; it felt like it understood my question, and that's a very qualitative thing for me, right? Like it's subjective as hell. I have no real way of knowing, but it felt that way, and
mhm,
there will be subconscious things in there that I haven't given too much thought about, like exactly what is that
mhm.
subconsciously? Is it like that you have a perception of your like the question, like there's a particular headspace that you're in asking the question, and the model seems to understand that headspace, but I don't know how to quantify that.
Another way to understand this question is, let's say there was weave, and braid, you know, and they're
Hmm.
competitive products, right?
Okay.
Like, what are they going to be looking at to choose between the two products?
I mean, capabilities of like what can they do? Like if one can just chat and the other can also save notes into Notion, then maybe those kind of added features become things that people would look at as differentiating. But for the most part, I think those choices come down much more to UX and like just how it feels to use. That's been my experience of building products anyway. That it's rarely about the quality of your features, and it's much more about the quality of your UX that makes people perceive that your app is better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
There's
feature sets are very fungible. Like they look very similar across applications
not
for the
really,
most
but like
part.
integrations is a big one, right? Like you just said, if you can integrate into Notion and the competitor can't, and I care about Notion, right? Or
Yeah, for
Obsidian.
that like one person, yeah. Like for the person who uses Notion, but that's not
Yeah,
the value prop of the whole app, right? So it's like we sync with Notion. That doesn't inherently make the app better than one that doesn't. It just makes it better for the people who use Notion.
yeah,
But that may be like a huge overlap with your target market, but that's going
yeah,
to be
exactly. Or
dependent.
whatever however they write, right? Like, maybe it doesn't sync with Notion, but is there a way to, I don't know, connect it to Apple Pages or
Hmm.
Notes or something? Like, is there an interface that makes it useful there? Because, like, let's say you get interest, because right now you don't know who your market is. You're guessing that
Yeah.
it's the technical people at meetups or whatever. But let's say
Hmm.
your market is students in college, where they have
Yeah,
to
that's true.
type it up in Google Docs. Is there how is that, how do they play together, right? It becomes a big uh, consideration, that
Hmm.
can take you over that.
No, that's true. And I guess the true answer to that is I don't know like what that feature would be because, as you say, I don't know my target market yet. I'm assuming who it is, and
Mhm.
I have to just put it out there. And that's why I've explicitly held back on adding any features to Weave, really. There's a lot of ideas that I have, but I've held back on all of them. It is just a feed of your bookmarks and a chat window that you can talk with them and you can do search, and that's it. That's the only features. There's so many more I think I could add,
So
but I'm
feed,
holding back on
chat,
adding any of them.
yeah, feed, chat, and what was the
And
third thing you
search,
said?
feed, chat, and
Search.
search. Yeah.
Okay, feed, chat,
So,
and
but the
search.
search, but it's all integrated. So you can just ask to search for something. The agent will do the search, and then it will start to like give you a summary of the search, what you're seeing as the results, and then spark new conversations. But it is fundamentally just a feed of your bookmarks, a chat window, and search right now. so many other things that I could add, but I'm choosing not to purely because I want to start people using it, and then they're going to suggest to me what they want to see. I'm going to speak with them, and they're going to say, "I'd love this to sync with Notion." And then I hear that 10 times, and I've spoken with 12 people. I'm like, "Okay, cool. Maybe I should sync it with Notion," and I can start to prioritize those features. Um, and another thing that I want to add, which is related to that, is in chat at various points where the conversation starts to lull, it will ask for feedback on what would you like to be able to do with this information, and then it syncs that into the backend, synthesizes it, summarizes all of that from the various users, and then we'll start to feed back into the system and periodically ping users with like, "Hey, here's two ideas. Which ones you like better? Like, should
Mm.
we sync with Notion or should we like have iCal integration or something? I don't know." Like, and then
Yeah,
people can
yeah,
just
no,
say
it's
like gauntlet them,
for
and then we
sure.
can
I'm just trying to
bubble those
think.
things up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to brainstorm with you, right? So, like, in terms of like feed, chat, and so, right?
Hmm.
Uh, how would they judge the quality of the feed?
So the feed itself, like the default feed, is just the things they bookmark in reverse chronological order.
Hmm.
The first judgment point would be search. How good are the search results? Like if I know I've got a bookmark and I try to search for it and I don't find it, that's bad,
Yeah.
obviously. So people are going to judge that on like the how relevant are the search results when I search for something, and how relevant is the search query, because sometimes the model itself will decide the query for you,
Hmm.
because it's trying to help you along, and it's like you haven't well defined the query, so it'll ask you a bit more information, and then maybe you answer that, and then it'll do a query for you. But it's not actually what you asked directly. It's synthesized from the model, like
Hmm.
probing you a bit more. So how good is that process? Like, is it asking good follow-up questions, but then coming up with terrible queries because it's getting caught up in some other detail that wasn't relevant? So those kind of quality factors are definitely going to be judged on the quality of it. And then the other part is just like how engaging, like what's the personality of the model? Like, does it feel nice to talk with? And this is like a
Hmm.
topic that comes up a lot recently, where people talk about ChatGPT versus Claude,
Hmm.
and a lot of people have the opinion that Claude's vibe is just better. Like
Hmm.
there's something intangible about the way Claude, quote, behaves that makes it feel nicer to interact with. ChatGPT feels a bit colder, and there's personality in there. And that's like an intangible thing. And I know Anthropic study that. Like they've got people who actually actively think about how do we give it a vibe and how do we make people perceive the personality of the model in a particular way. And I find that fascinating. And I think if we're building assistants, which I think are going to become ubiquitous, that's something that people are going to develop preferences around
Well,
personality and how they want to be interacted with.
describe a five-star experience.
I think it's like fairly low touch. I think the best experience with a product is you don't have to use it that much. I don't want it to be the kind of thing that you have to be scrolling on for hours per day. That's just not fun, and it kind of defeats the entire purpose of the rocket ship for the mind idea. So the best experience would be you would log on, and then there's almost two modes of using it. There's manager mode and maker mode, which is interestingly an Alex Hormozi idea, but we'll run with it. But it's so you're either a manager mode or you're a maker mode. Maker mode is kind of free form. You're just in thinking mode. You're trying to explore ideas. You're trying to find inspiration. That's where we're trying to drop you into these moments of serendipity, and that's just your own expression, and that can go as long or as short as you want it to be,
Hmm.
because there's no necessarily end goal there. It's just expression and creativity and trying to find things that work for you.
Hmm.
The other side of the experience is much more of the quantitative, like judging the outputs that these engines are producing for you. And
Hmm.
that process should be as low touch as possible. You should be able to just quickly yes or no things, give it some quick feedback, and have the system really understand what your goals are. Like, what are you really trying to? You don't have to micromanage like the different aspects of how to do it and really craft
Hmm.
the prompts, and like that's a lot of work. And if you're managing a lot of those, that's a full-time job in and of itself. And I don't want to create another monster where I've automated people's work, but then given them like twice as much work to manage now because they've now got to manage all of these different knowledge engines. So the 5-star experience would be as low touch as possible. The system's just smart enough to understand what you want for the most part, and you just have to give it very light touch guidance here and there to make sure it's on track and you're steering it as you move through life and your goals change and the knowledge that you have updates and you can make sure that it's up to date. But for the most part, it's just trying to be as low touch as possible.
Love. What about a 6-star experience?
It just does everything for you.
What does that look like?
Um, like a collaborative team of co-founders for your company or co-collaborators, thought collaborators, for whatever you're working on. You're working on a book. Why not have 10 of the world experts in the topic that you're writing about on hand to talk to at any point and who can do research and judge like outputs of other models. And it's like a collaborative team as
Mm.
large as you need it to be to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And for the most part, they just get the work done like a team would. Like that would be the 6-star experience.
That's awesome. So it's
Mm.
like almost you you connect it to Twitter at that point. Like you use the API and like
Yeah.
go and look for stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think the 6-star experience does start to look like just an automated team. It's a team of people that you can define that do various job roles that you hire. And I can almost imagine a future where this is like leading to the LinkedIn for AI kind of idea, where you do literally hire a particular agent who's good at a particular job, and maybe there's a marketplace for them.
Mm.
And you can go out and see, like, I need one that's really good at growth hacking, and you find one that's actually really good at it, and they've got good reviews, and you can use that. So you can almost hire
What I
teams,
like
and
about
those teams can
your
collaborate.
Yeah, what I like about your way of doing that versus just hiring whatever is the control aspect. Like, because
Hmm.
bookmarks, it's almost coloring things with your taste,
Exactly.
right? Which is what I like about your way of doing it. And I think folders as agents is a good idea.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
this
like,
is also related to an idea, the folders as agents. So I had this idea of personas,
yeah,
which are groups of bookmarks.
mm,
We could call them a folder that you define. And then the agent is effectively trying to infer what kind of person, what personality would have written this collection of tweets. And it could be
mm,
from anybody. It doesn't have to be tweets from the same person. It's just like, here's a collection of 25, 50 tweets that roughly have like the kind of thinking that I would like in this agent. And then the agent tries to derive what personality would have said all of these. And
mm.
then you can now talk to that personality. Um,
Yeah, we're
and
saying
then
the
that
same thing. I
personality can
think
do
it's just
things. Yeah, no, we are. And
yeah,
it's just like that was because then you can have those collaborate with each other and you can have them give work to each other and you can speak with them and get maybe you have one that's like really
yeah,
positive and one that's really negative and you can have them debate your ideas and things like that.
yeah. Exactly. Like maybe like there's like whatever the co-founder, which is like let's call it like the mother agent, right? And then each folder is like an employee. Like you put all the marketing bookmarks in like the marketing folder. You put all
Hmm.
the PR ones in the PR one. You put all the product one in the product one, and then
Yeah,
each one of those become like an agent, and then they can kind of work together. But there's always
exactly.
the master agent, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would love to have that and then have even a layer above that where it's not just job tasks like
Mm.
design or PR or marketing. You can have ones that are just like, here's a bunch of really contrarian tweets. And then there's a
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
contrarian
exactly.
agent.
With that, yeah.
So you can slice it up not just by topic, but also just about like the style of writing
Mm.
or the way the ideas are expressed. Like let's get like a really kind of tech bro, like
Mm.
very straight to the point, you're wrong or you're right, kind of like straight down the middle, black and white kind of person. And then you throw in another agent that has much more of a nuanced, like emotional way of looking at the
Mm.
world. And then you have
Oh,
you
so
have
you're
those two agents discuss
yeah.
ideas.
I like your idea. So it's like not only are you designing roles, you also want to add a personality layer in that as well. So it's not just
Exactly.
like knowledge bases. Um, It's also the expression of that knowledge.
100%. Yeah. I
Um,
I think that's really important, and I haven't really seen many people talk about that as like an important factor for these kind of applications. But people respond well to personality, and there's certain personalities that can, like, if you meet people in your own life, there's certain personalities that just don't resonate with you, and they can be giving you great information, but your
mm,
natural biases and tendencies are going to shut that person down, even though they're giving you good information, just because the way it's delivered just doesn't resonate with you. But then there's other people that say the exact same thing in a different way that does resonate with you. And
mhm.
the idea that there's one AI agent that you could speak to and it just knows is just absurd. Of course, there's going to be different agents that do the same thing, but they distill the information in a different way, and different people will gravitate to different ones. So I think having the ability to use your own bookmark feed to curate personalities that you can talk to feels like a strong way to get you to a place where you like the agents that you're talking with because they're curated from information that you picked yourself.
Yeah, I'm just imagining this like, as like a almost becomes like a video game, right? Because you can have knowledge-based folders and then you can have style folders.
Yeah.
And then you can combine them to create whatever agent you want or
Hmm.
multiple. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Or and
amazing.
workflows where multiple collaborate with each other, and then you can give all of those tools. So now that the agents define the personality and the kind of style of thinking, and then the tools give them capabilities. So then you can have the emotional agent speak with the the tech bro, and then have the output of that conversation go to the marketing agent that then tries to distill that into like summaries that are given to like an SEO agent that then writes a bunch of SEO content for it.
And this is like the
And you're
seven-star
writing for
experience
like
is
the
when you can do that
yeah, when you can start to
seamlessly.
layer all these kind of workflows and have them interact with each other. And there's a lot of companies that are trying to do these agentic workflows. But the thing that I see wrong with those products is that they're starting you from the workflow. Like you have to define the workflow, and that's like a very technical thing to do. Most people are not going to want to dive in and build flow diagrams of how data flows around an
Mm,
agentic system. Like they're
mm,
just not thinking about that stuff. So I want to come at it from a different way of I'm gonna show you your bookmarks and you can talk with it. And then you're gonna over time get it to do things because you're gonna talk about something and it's gonna suggest something and then you're like, oh yeah, we could write a tweet thread about this. And then it's gonna bring the agent that writes a tweet thread, it's gonna write that. And now you're gonna have a tweet that you can use. But then in the kind of vision that I have for it, there's a button in that chat that says convert this chat to a workflow. And then it's going to
mm,
figure out what did you actually achieve in this chat, and then it will distill that down into a workflow for you. And
mm,
then that's a workflow you can now trigger. So now it's like generate a tweet and you just run that workflow against your new bookmarks and it does the same job over. So you're almost, you coach it the first time by doing it yourself and interacting with it. And then you can trigger it into a workflow. And then you
mm.
can cascade those workflows together over time. So you never have to touch a graph editor to make a workflow. You just do the work and then it will figure out the complexity of how to make that into a proper
Mm.
workflow for you.
Yeah, almost like a training mode where you hit train and you start the workflow and then kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. You just do the
And
work. You don't have to figure out how to do it well. Just figure out how to do something like what you want. And then hopefully the 7 star we've experienced on the back end
mm,
figures out how to make that into a really nice workflow that works and it scales well for you.
yeah, and it's self-improving, right? Like the more you use it, the
Yeah,
more you give it feedback, the more
exactly. Yeah.
it gets better. All right.
That's the goal.
There's this idea in storytelling called the inciting incident, and
Hmm.
it's the best way to describe it is like Super Mario Brothers, right? Everyone's living happily. Bowser appears out of nowhere, captures Peach, and now Mario has to go on an adventure,
Hmm.
right? So that is the inciting incident. It's like the call to adventure. What happened that started this whole thing? So
Hmm.
what is the inciting incident for your target like customer?
So I think for some of them, the ones who already have bookmarks,
Mm,
um, I think that incident can be Just like the realization that they're procrastinating when they bookmark things, that they're
Hmm.
actually achieving nothing. And you will have that realization. Like I've had that realization where I'm like, I'm just collecting these things and I'm doing nothing with them. And I feel really bad about that because it there's a real friction between where I want to be in my mind and I want to have like this productive knowledge engine of bookmarks and all this information flowing through my life. And it just works great. And then the reality is I don't use half of it.
Mm.
And that's a real friction for me. And that can be the call to adventure for
Really.
some people. And it is for me. Um, I think the harder question that I don't necessarily have the answers to is the people who don't already have the bookmarks. Um, like, what's that moment for them? Because I
Mm.
think it could be interesting to say to those people, like, hey, there's bookmarks and you could gain information out of them. And that's compelling on the surface, but that doesn't feel like a real call to action kind of pull of like, oh my God, I
Mm.
have to do this. Um, so there's another hook for those people that I don't
Yeah.
know yet. I don't know what that hook is yet for those people.
I think it might be that you're following all these great people and curating this feed and you're doing nothing about it, right?
Yeah, I suppose that could be it. Tap into the energy of getting stuck in a scroll hole, not being productive.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Like what are
this
you
can be
on
the
here for?
antidote from that.
Yeah,
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 it's like,
yeah.
what are
The
you doing
scroll.
it for? Yeah, you can scroll hole and it's not productive, but
Mhm.
you can scroll hole and if you're bookmarking interesting stuff as you go, you can get value out of that and not feel bad about that destructive feeling of just endlessly scrolling.
Yeah, it's different
Yeah.
parts of the funnel, right? Like the bookmark are like just more down the funnel
Hmm.
than those that haven't bookmarked, and it's just a matter of just moving them down the funnel. And
Hmm.
whereas bookmark used to be like, hey, you can go here. Your end goal is not the bookmark, right? Your end goal is the
Yeah.
whatever, which makes the bookmarking process now more compelling. Like, trust me,
Yeah.
me as a person, like I have bookmarks. Uh, I also have what are they called? Not bookmarks. What is the things you tab? Lists,
Lists. Yeah.
and those sometimes I also never use, right? And like,
Yeah. No, that's
that
true.
can be part of the personality thing you were talking about.
Hmm. You did hit on an interesting point there that I like you've opened up my thought here a lot on the funnel. Like I've just been fixating on people who already have bookmarks, but you're right, the funnel is much larger than that. It's people who would potentially use them but just never did because bookmarks are not that useful. And now that you mention that, I have found myself since I've built Weave and I'm testing like the kind of MVP myself and I have it running, I do find myself bookmarking things more regularly on my own feed that I just see and I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting, but I'm not going to read it in depth right now. I've just read like the first sentence and it sounds interesting and I'll just bookmark it because I prefer the experience of reading it in depth when I can ask questions immediately. Where if I read it right now, I have thoughts and ideas that are in my head and it's like I don't know what they are. Like when I look at the feed again later, those thoughts
And
are gone.
at this point, you're not even like people who are just curious, because that is like at the heart of your target market. Are just curious people that want to do cool shit, want to create cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I've met a lot of people that are very good at shortcuts. They just know how to leverage shortcuts in a way that, I'm in envy of them. So I'm imagining those people would like if they can say, hey, I can create a marketing agent, they see a giant thread that has whatever billion likes and reposts and whatever and skim it and be like, you know what? My marketing agent can use this information,
Yeah.
bookmark, whereas before they never had any interest in reading it.
100%. That's really something that I would love to tap into. That
Yeah.
feeling because I've had that feeling of like, huh, that's like a I would love to have that in the system. And that this
Mm.
is before I even have the concept of creating agents. But if
Yeah.
I had like a marketing agent from
Mm.
on Weave and I saw marketing bookmark, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, that'd be amazing. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't even have to read it. I just have to skim it and roughly tell if it's decent, and then I can bookmark it. And then if it's bad, maybe Weave has a system of filtering that out later.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't have to worry about that now. You should just be
Yeah.
like, oh, this could be interesting for the marketing agent. Just add it, and you feel good about yourself because you know that you're making these systems smarter as you scroll.
Yeah, and there's like, bro, there's people like there's this guy, his name's Oliver Fish. I love that guy. And he is the most advanced SEO person you can ever meet. Like I have like a private relationship with him, and he tells me stuff and shows me the proof. It's not just like, oh, just bragging. Like he's like, look, look, look. And he does things
Hmm.
that are so high level that even when he posts technical SEO posts that look like they're extremely useful, I have no clue most of the
Hmm.
time what he's talking about. But if I can just feed that knowledge to an agent and then tell the agent, the SEO agent, to write me an article with my creative writing guy,
Hmm.
you know, it, it,
Exactly.
it
That's the
becomes,
thing.
yeah, it becomes amazing, to just think about. And then in the end, it's the control part is kind of where I think this is going to be a big winner versus whatever the Dharmesh model, where it's like LinkedIn and I hire and whatever.
Hmm.
You know, me as a control freak, I don't want to do that. I don't trust people that I've hired in the past. I'd much rather
Yeah.
control and shape the
Yeah.
exact agent I want
I agree.
and use it
And I also
then.
think the crossover between the demographic that I'm targeting and the demographic that cares about that control is quite
Mm,
a lot. I think there's a big overlap between those two groups
mm,
because I'm definitely on your team on that one with like, I love the control. I hate having something that somebody else did that I don't control. And I'm like, it doesn't do exactly what I want, or I just want to understand what it's doing and I don't
mm,
really understand, which makes it
yeah,
difficult to use. There's all these things that I don't like. Being able to hand curate everything that goes into it. Um, and then if it gets good, maybe there's a marketplace for it. And then maybe other people can like use it later.
yeah.
So we
That
can kind
is.
of back our way into the Dharmesh model,
Mhm.
but we get there by building the best things curated for the individual first.
Yeah,
But it's
um,
difficult
um,
for Dharmesh to get to my model from
yeah,
his. But it's easy for me to
exactly.
get from mine to his.
Yeah, then it becomes like the proprietary training data, right? Like your bookmarks or whatever we're using is all private, right? So no one
Mhm.
has access to that, you know, except you, but you probably at some point are going to have to do security stuff and encryption and all of that. So you don't even have
Mhm.
access to the data to make it more valuable for people to take it seriously at a high level, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. It's just extremely exciting, you know. Moving on. It's just good to think about. Like this
Yeah,
conversation
absolutely.
has
I
sparked
love
so
it.
many ideas for me too, uh, which is amazing. Uh, anyways, Supervillain you,
Hmm.
okay? Adrian, 100 times better than you, but he's you, and he's Supervillain. Just to, you know, make you not have too much empathy with him. All right? Describe that Supervillain. What are they doing?
That supervillain works a lot. They're driven. Um, they get they get a lot done, um, but not always necessarily for good reasons, right? It's like um, I think the version of me that looks like a supervillain is just doing a lot of stuff for the sake of doing it, um, without too much concern for the why and the potential ramifications of it. Just doing it. I think that's a tendency of like the kind of driven tech bro anyway, is that you do the thing for the sake of the doing it, uh, not for this. Like, you don't think about the consequences necessarily. Of like, is this a good idea to even try to do?
So he
Um,
does a lot more like profit centric work.
I think so. Yeah, I think it would be let's just build like the wackiest shit we can, um, the moonshot ideas that are just crazy that would probably like because that incentive really drives you towards gray areas ethically, because to maximize those kind of things for the just for the sake of doing it, like takes you into some very morally sketchy territory. And I think like there's people in the world that are already there, right? Like I would say like your Elon Musks and characters like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's almost the canonical supervillain of the archetype of the driven tech person, like the driven
Mm-hmm.
technical mind. Like the canonical supervillain there is Elon Musk to some degree, because
But
he's
let's say
just so driven.
they're building a weave too.
Yeah, I mean the supervillain that uses that unethically, if that's how we're defining supervillain,
It's however,
um,
yeah, however you take.
that individual is using the data internally to weave to figure things out, um, that can be used against the users of Weave. That would be the supervillain. Almost like what Facebook did, or any social media platform, where they figured out a lot about who you are and your tendencies and as an individual and the groups that you fall into and your archetypes as a person because of what you post on social media, what you like on social media, the kind of things that you gravitate towards, and they can figure out a lot about you. The same is also true with Weave, where you're seeing the kind of things that people are ingesting, the kind of things they're
Mm-hmm.
bookmarking, the kind of things they're talking about, the way that they talk,
Mm-hmm.
the way that they think about ideas, the way that they express their ideas, the kind of ideas that they're not willing to grasp or are incapable of grasping. All of these things are
Mm-hmm.
pieces of information that could exist inside of Weave and probably would if Weave scales. And that information can be used in all kind of ways, against people, um,
And then
that are
performance
weird.
gains, like, do you think that kind of person that is not morally grounded or more like has moral blinders and is like, yeah, I got all this data. I'm going to use it to make weave more addictive, more, popular, all of that. Is that possible in your imagination?
Yeah, I think it would be possible. I think the more potentially higher leverage usage of that data is not necessarily to get people more addicted to Weave, um, but it's to figure out more about what people are addicted to in the first place,
Mm,
i.e., what are they bookmarking regularly, and what are they discussing regularly, and then you can use that to craft models that understand how to accurately create that kind of content, and then you scale that into arbitrarily many accounts on Twitter that scale your own personal influence by crafting content according to those people's archetypes, and you craft that to create virality for whatever narratives that you care about. And that's, I mean, to some degree, though, like that's like the Cambridge Analytica thing with Facebook. Like that's what they did.
yeah,
And
Dennis had
that to
a
me feels
fantastic,
that feels like the
yeah,
canonical supervillain thing.
yeah, Dennis had like a more, you know innocent example where he was like, Mark Zuckerberg all of a sudden, got into jujitsu and was doing like the bro thing and whatever else
Hmm.
because like he can understand the
Data driven.
trends and
Yeah.
what everybody's liking and all of that. He's like, oh, let me just rebrand based
Yeah.
on the data. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
did
that
a
is like that is a supervillain thing to do, right? If he did, if that's true, and he did do a rebrand based on, well, everybody's moving right, so I need to be positioned on the right. That's an incredibly supervillain thing to do, right?
right. That's awesome. So what could you do to kind of counteract that supervillain? Let's say in 10 years, like what can you focus on to fight the good fight, right, against that supervillain?
That's an interesting question. I think To some degree, it's hard to fight back against that because there's always concentrations of power
Mhm.
that can be abused
Yeah.
uh, when things grow and certain individuals have more power. That's just how that's unavoidable, I think.
Mm.
So you can mitigate those things, but I think transparency is a big part of how I think in general we reduce a lot of these negative effects of these things. There's a game theory idea called Moloch,
Mm.
Moloch.
Mm.
There's a fantastic article called Meditations on Moloch that's very worth reading for people. And it's the idea of Moloch is there things within game theory, like
Mm.
interactions, game theoretic interactions that you can take, where the incentive for one individual is to take an action that gives them a short-term gain but sacrifices a long-term value. And then
Mm.
they do that to gain that short-term gain. But now there's a domino effect where everyone else has to sacrifice that long-term value to remain competitive. And then the end state of that system is nobody's competitive anymore because everybody's doing the same thing, but everybody's collectively given up this shared value. So the
Mm.
only thing that happened is we gave up the shared value for no benefit. So that everybody's now in a state where they would actually prefer, like literally everyone in the system would
Mm.
prefer that we all had that value again, but we can never return there, despite the fact that everybody wants to go there, because there's this force of if one person defects, there's now an edge to not defecting, right? And it's like
Mm.
there's an interesting game theory thing there that is pervasive in the world. And a lot of what I think
Do you have
about
an
when it
example for
comes
that?
so like an example that I use to explain it is if you're in a theater
Mm.
and everybody's sitting down and everybody agrees sitting down's better. We all get a better view. The place is designed, the seats are all like kind of gradated so that everybody has a decent view from wherever they're sat. One person in the second row decides to stand up.
Mm.
The person behind them now can't see. So the way that they remedy that situation is they stand up too. And
Mm.
that creates this domino effect where now everybody has to stand up. And there's now no incentive for anybody to sit down because if they do, their view is worse. But
Mm.
everybody wants to sit down, but nobody unilaterally has the incentive to sit down. So we're all just standing, looking at each other, being like, why don't we all sit down? But nobody wants to make the first move. Obviously, like in that example, everybody would just agree. But in a real life game theoretic scenario, where it's actually adversarial, nobody wants to sit down first. And there's so many examples of things like that in life that you'll find that are just create these kind of Moloch domino effects.
Mm.
And when I think about these supervillain ideas, I'm always thinking through that lens of like, there are certain inherent things that can't be avoided, but there are also certain Moloch things that can be avoided, and they should be at all costs. So
Mm.
as an individual trying to move through the world and build things that could eventually grow to a scale where they create these Moloch effects, I always think about how can I be transparent upfront in a way that tries to mitigate those Moloch responses. So in
So
the
it's
case
almost
of
open source, like open source is the
exactly,
answer.
exactly, I do strongly believe that some version of like open source is the way that we avoid a lot of these Moloch situations by just giving
Mm.
everybody the information they need to know what my incentives are. Like if I stand up and I'm like, hey, I'm just standing up because I'm going to the restroom. I'll be back in a second, and nobody else is going to stand up. That's like you've just done that. But if somebody stands up and doesn't say anything, the person behind them might be like, are they going to stand there? Or like, what am I supposed to do? And now they might reactionarily stand up as well. And then
Mm.
now we've just created this domino effect. But if there was communication in that system, maybe that doesn't happen.
Mm.
So with the supervillain who could potentially do all of this stuff, I think trying to be as upfront about like everything that we do, like how are we storing everything? Are we encrypting? How can I prove that we're doing that encryption? Like, are there things that I can do that create more of a transparency publicly that makes it harder for me to do the Moloch thing? And ideally in such a way that I get reprimanded publicly if I do, because it's obvious that I'm doing it.
It's a very interesting idea, right? Like I'm not sure I get it completely, but let me just throw this at you and see if it resonates or is related. So, do you think if Facebook, for example, the data in Facebook was truly open source, does that relate? Like, would that create some sort of, hey, everybody has access to this data, therefore nobody's going to abuse that data because it's going to be obvious who's abusing that
Um,
data? Or
to
like,
some
is that,
degree.
yeah.
But I think like it breaks down a little bit in that particular case because there's a lot of other gotchas around that. But a more concrete example that's actually happening in the world is uh, like what I would call like vigilante researchers who of on-chain data.
Mm,
Because this is the first like on-chain, like blockchain stuff is the first experiment that we've really run in truly transparent systems where things are happening publicly and everybody can see everything. And it's provable that these things happened. And like this is the first real experiment of that. And what you find is that there's these vigilante researchers who they're not hired by anybody in particular. They just care about fairness and they see discrepancies of things happening on chain and they start digging. And they have uncovered, there's been many cases, particularly a guy called ZachXBT on Twitter, who
mm.
has found and uncovered these massive scam networks and done research that's ended up with people being put in jail. Like law enforcement has used his research to put people in jail. Like there's this now system where loads of people just donate money to Zach because of this research that he's doing to keep everything safe. And that creates an incentive where people are now worried about doing shady things on chain because these people are going to find them. And that keeps things more honest. Like, of course, there are still people breaking rules and doing scams and stuff. But in my mind, it's much easier to do scams when the data's opaque. And then you can scam people because it's hard for anybody to detect it's happening. And like we saw this with like the
Mm.
financial crisis in 2008, all this hidden data that if all of those mortgage-backed securities were public information that anybody could troll through, it never would have got to the place that it did, um, where people could just keep abusing the system until it eventually collapses.
But how
And
would
that kind
you?
of transparency.
That's the thing that like is extremely scary to think about, right? Uh, because the top layer of everything you're doing is still OpenAI and Anthropic, right? Like they have access to all this data,
Yeah, yeah. For now, for sure, that's true. I
right?
think in its fully fledged version, like Weave has its own model,
Mm.
but there's always still some trust involved in those things. Like, and this is what I said, there's always some concentration of power that's kind of unavoidable. Like it's unavoidable that Mark Zuckerberg has disproportionate amount of power over social media globally because he controls Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. It's like that's all him. So of course, he has more power than most. But it's like, how much scope does he have to abuse that power in a way that goes undetected? That's the thing that I care about in this particular instance,
But is there a
being able
system
to
that we
detect
can
them.
create that is rivaling that can create different incentives, game theory wise, where
Uh,
there is no temptation to do something innocent as the brand change, you know?
I mean, maybe there isn't a way to protect against. I don't know. I don't have good answers.
Yeah. No, it's
But
just a good thing to think about, you know?
there's certainly, it is just my instinct that more transparent systems are on the whole better because they can be policed by a wider number of people with
Yeah.
differing incentives themselves, which keeps the whole system kind of more neutrally aligned, as opposed to opaque systems where the person at the top can just use it for whatever means they decide. Um,
Which is
but yeah,
kind
I
of where
mean,
the
there's
open
always
sourcing thing comes. It's like the model you like, where it's like you can self-host it and see everything. But if you want it hosted and convenient, you pay for it. There's an
exactly,
element
yeah,
of open source transparency there where it's like,
yeah,
hey, this is how we're using the data, and you can get the exact same results if you
hmm
self-hosted or if you use us. There's
yeah,
no difference.
yeah, exactly. That gives me a lot as a user. That kind of system gives me a lot of confidence that the company that I will eventually pay for this service and I will give them my data and they can use it, but I implicitly trust them more because they've shown me the source code that they're using. And if they ever go off the rails, I can choose to self-host. I can just stop using the paid version and go use the self-hosted version myself and still continue to get the value. So their incentive is to not screw me
Hmm.
because I do have that option. And that is a powerful force that if your entire user base could continue to use your product but stop paying you money, then you're in trouble. Especially if your license is permissible that somebody else could potentially sell a hosted version of it. Like if you're willing to give me a license that allows somebody else to host it and charge for it, then I'm really confident you're not screwing me.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's I like I like that you're full of deep wisdoms. I'm learning a lot.
I
Uh,
appreciate that.
okay, so have you seen the old Spartacus movie?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so there's the Spartacus was this gladiator,
Hmm.
and he freed the gladiators because gladiators were slaves. So
Hmm.
he raised this army of gladiators and fought against the Roman Empire, right? And there's the scene in this movie where they capture the army, and they
Hmm.
want to know who is Spartacus, and if you tell us who Spartacus is, we'll spare the army, and kill Spartacus, obviously.
Hmm.
And so one person in the army steps forward and he's like, I am Spartacus. And then another person steps forward and says, I am Spartacus. And like the whole
Hmm.
army basically is I am Spartacus, like because he represents this. So what is that ideal for you? Like, you know, for someone to do that, let's say I am Adrian, right? Like in this army of Adrians, like what is this belief that is so sacred that you're willing to, in a romantic world, obviously, just,
Hmm.
give
Hmm.
your life to.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is probably very closely aligned to what we've just spoken about, like the ideals that are embodied by a lot of people in software of it's almost like I hesitate to say libertarian because that's quite loaded and I don't consider myself a libertarian politically, but it's directionally those ideals of sovereignty of the individual and a truly collaborative effort to try and improve everything for everyone. And that's what open source tries to do. Like I did something that's cool and drives value, but I can't change the world on my own. But if I give everybody this code and everybody incrementally improves it, then maybe we can change the world. And that's quite a ballsy kind of position to take on life that we can collaborate. Like if you think about like if you were to explain open source collaboration 100 years ago, it would seem absurd that we're going to get thousands of people from all over the world who speak different languages and have different ideologies and all sorts of ideas about life, but they're all going to collaborate on this massive open source initiative for free and just give up their time and give everybody their code for free and everybody's going to use it. You'd be like, well, what the hell? Like, that's some communist utopian ideal that's never going to exist. Like, that can never exist. But it exists today. It's working and it drives most of the value in the world today to some degree. Like there's not, there's problems with it for sure, but it's quite crazy that we've got to a point where thousands and thousands of people all over the world give up their time willingly to build products for other people to use for free. And everybody collaborates in that system. Like that's magical. And I believe in it wholeheartedly because I've seen it working in software. And I think that ethos could be valuable everywhere in other parts of life. And that would be for me like that kind of ethos is my Spartacus. Like that's I would stand for that ideal.
Like the collaboration for the greater good,
Yeah,
kind of like.
where we're not like aggressively capitalistic about it, where we're like everything has to be intellectual property and somebody owns it and somebody has the rights to it, exclusive monetization on it, and I'm going to milk it for 25 years and then
Mm,
everybody else can catch up. Um, like that's slowing down progress for the explicit goal of short-term monetary gain for the
mhm.
individual who came up with the first idea. the software world doesn't really think that way at its core, the open source world anyway. The
Mm.
VC world thinks that way, but the open source software world doesn't. It's like if we all collaborate, we can all do well because we're not competing in a zero-sum game. We're
No.
competing in a positive-sum game. If we all collaborate, we can all do better, and we do. And massive companies like Meta are doing open source work for free. They're making React and just giving it to the world for
Mm.
free, and they're giving Llama models for free, and loads of companies are doing it now, and everybody's getting better because of it. And I do truly believe in that view of the world, that it is possible for us to collaborate and all get better because we're not playing a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I made up a word for it called collaborative accelerationism.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a good description. I like it.
Yeah. Uh, all right. Describe the most genius artist.
The most genius what?
Artist.
Artist. Um, hmm. The most genius artist. So I think in general, I think like the most genius artists, the most genius creatives for me are people who do simple things. Um, that well, they look simple. They make it look simple, but they're actually doing extraordinarily layered, complex things with the work that they're doing. Um, and to that, I think like I really like artists like Jackson Pollock, because he's seemingly just throwing
Mhm,
paint all over a canvas in a
mhm,
very haphazard and chaotic way.
mhm,
Um, but he's somehow creates things that evoke emotions and create particular feelings in people. And I don't fully understand how the hell he does that, to be honest.
mhm.
I think it's extraordinary that he can just throw paint on a canvas and have people feel things and feel pretty consistently similar things from the work. It's
Amazing. Yeah.
I think things like that. And for me, I had a kind of a journey because I grew up for the longest time thinking his work was terrible because it was just he threw paint on a canvas. I don't understand. But I got it the first time I saw one in person, and I was like, oh shit. Like I sat in front of it and I was like, this is actually spectacular. And I never thought I thought I'd sit there, take a picture of it, and then just tell everybody how shit it was, but it wasn't at all. It was like, oh my God, I felt something, and that was weird because I didn't expect to. So th things like that really grab me. Same for music. Like I love like guitar players. I love guitar music, and I love guitar players that are able to hold your attention playing nothing. Like I think of guitar players like BB King, and
Mhm,
plays like three notes in 20 seconds, and somehow has you on bated breath,
mhm.
like waiting. You're feeling something despite the silence, because the silence is part of what he's expressing, and doing that in a smooth way that he's playing three notes and he's saying so much more than these virtuoso technical players that are playing 1,000 notes a minute and they're saying nothing. There's many people like that as
Yeah.
well that just they say a lot of words and say a whole lot of nothing in the process. And people who are able to say a lot with very little, I think they're all creative geniuses to me.
Love it. Describe the most genius artist duo.
I think like the most genius creative work in general is work that is so personal that it couldn't ever be applicable to anyone else. And that makes it universally applicable
Mhm,
because it's something so deeply, intimately yours. And that makes it really human. And ultimately, that's what makes it relatable. Where if you try to make something that seems relatable, you end up dumbing it down too much. And it's not
mhm,
relatable to anyone. It almost becomes cliche because you try to make it relatable. And people can smell that. They can smell the inauthenticity of you're trying to do this for me, not for you.
mhm.
But the true genius artists do it for themselves as a pure creative expression of their own humanity. And that ends up making it universally applicable to everyone.
I love it. Batman. has a bat signal. When the bat signal is out, it means crime is going on and he shows up, saves the day, right? What is the bat signal for you?
Mhm. What is the bat signal? Um, so there's like a particular emotion that I feel um, that I kind of live for. Um, there's this feeling, it doesn't come along very often, but when it does, I drop everything and pursue it. And it's this kind of feeling of almost like inspiration, with the clouds parting. Everything just clicks, it makes sense suddenly. And I've not had that feeling many times, but every time I do, I know this is it. This is what I'm here for. Like this is, I need to drop everything. It doesn't matter how important I thought this other work was. I know this is what I'm here for. Everything else is training. And that's the way that
Mm,
it feels. Like it genuinely does kind of feel like a bat signal in that sense that everything else I've been doing was just sharpening the axe. But I've got this intense feeling of inspiration that the clouds are parting and this is a thing that I have to do. And this is fight night now. Everything else is just sparring in the gym.
mm,
Um, and I've I've experienced it maybe 3 or 4 times in my life where I've had this like cloud parting, oh my God, this is real inspiration. And every time I've done it, every time it's happened, I've committed to it fully and it's always worked out well for me. And like yeah, I
oh,
trust that. So that is like quite literally my bat signal.
the bat signal, I love it. Why would anyone wear a hat with the logo, like the Weave logo? What does it represent?
Hopefully,
What are they representing?
hopefully they're representing a particular version of themselves that they are the kind of person that is curious and wants to do things in the world, but they're also not workaholics. These are people who want to find progress, but also balance in their lives. They want to have the time to be able to go rock climbing or spend time with their kids. They
Like an
want to do those
inspired
things.
life almost. Like they're
Yeah.
living because
They're
this idea
living.
of like inspiration, creative inspiration it seems big for you.
Yeah, it is because I think that's the lifeblood for me personally. The thing that drives my contentment and my happiness is that spark that I feel when you create things. That's always been the thing that if I'm not doing that, I feel depressed. If I am doing that, I feel good about myself. If
Mhm.
I go for a day and I haven't created something, however little in the world today, I feel a little bit worse for it. So everything that I do is driven by that because that's what drives me. It's what I find inspiring and it's what keeps me happy and keeps me sane
Mhm.
and keeps me out of the dark places of your mind. So that's what I try to build for because it's the only thing that I really know. So if I can cultivate that in other people
Mhm.
and because a lot of it, like I don't, the supervillain in me is a workaholic, and like I
Mhm.
said that earlier, that if
Mhm.
the supervillain in me would work incredibly hard, and they would be a workaholic, and I don't like that tendency of myself because I don't want the work to be the end. I want it to be the means to the end, and the real end is to be able to live the life you want with the people that you want to live it with. And I don't want to miss the forest for the trees and end up being a workaholic who just does that. Um, so trying to cultivate something where people are willing to follow that spark and be curious and work hard towards it, but also still remember what life is for. And
Mhm.
hopefully Weave can be a tool that allows people to get out of their own way and still achieve their goals quickly, um, while still having time to live their lives.
And like, what's your next three phases?
I mean, phase one is going to be user acquisition,
Yeah.
like early user acquisition, just to start gathering feedback. And then really trying to nail down like what is Weave, because Weave is many things right now, and it could be many things.
Mhm.
It's a lot of potential, but really figuring out where does it resonate, where are
Mhm.
people really finding it. Maybe it's students, Maybe it's professionals. Maybe it's like middle-aged women who have shopping lists to like
Hmm.
manage. I don't even know. Like there's many things that it could be. It's right now it's a interesting UX for interacting with an LLM for me. That's where it sits in my mind. So really figuring out what it is. What is it? What am I actually building
Yeah.
here? Who's it
What is
for?
we? Where are my
Um,
customers? You
exactly. So
find your customers. What happens next?
um so then I start doubling down on the things that are working, building the things that are really driving the value for people and trying to cut the things that don't. And that's the phase at which it really starts to shape into a thing that becomes a voice of its own. It becomes something that is itself, not trying to be everything. It's trying to be just the thing it's supposed to be.
Uh,
But I have to find the ideal user and get some feedback and figure out why they like it first, and then the next stage is to then craft it into the sculpture. I've now got the
mm.
design almost, and now it's crafting it into the sculpture, and yeah, and then from there it's just grow it, get people using it,
And do
make
you
people's
plan
lives better.
on raising like funding, getting a team, all that, or do you just want to just do this like yourself?
Maybe so
Too far ahead?
I
Yeah.
generally don't like raising money. I've been in the startup community. I've been in companies that have raised money, and I'm kind of over it, to be honest. I didn't. It killed a lot of what I loved about building a lot of time because you're now no longer building for your customer. You're building for the VC or your investors because they have their own motives, and it just creates this
Depends on the
jarring
investor, though.
experience. It does. It really does.
Yeah.
If you get really good investors, it's going to be great. It's hard to find them, really good ones, and yeah,
Your idea
I've
will find
never,
the really good ones.
yeah, I've never found the really good ones, or
Yeah.
I've never worked with them anyway. So I think I've
Yeah,
spoken with
maybe
them, but I've never
that's
worked with
true.
them.
I'm also judging from the outside, but I found the recent VC. Her name is Alana Goya. She runs Base Case, and
Okay.
she's doing amazing stuff. Like
Yeah,
she's.
no doubt. I've seen it. I've
Mhm,
seen them. I've seen they do exist for
mhm.
sure. But for me personally, I think my short term vision is definitely just it's a fun project for me. I'm just going to
I
try and see
like.
where it goes, and then if it does seem like this is something and it's more than I can take on my own, then I would absolutely be open to raising money and growing a team. But for now, it's a fun
Yeah,
thing for
you're
me to
just
do.
having
And
fun. I love it.
yeah.
Final task.
Hmm.
Another piece of paper or another document on your iPad,
Hmm.
or just scroll down to where it's all white.
Yep.
Imagine your life at peak
That's good.
impact. I want you to draw your impact at that moment. Same question.
So it's a happy family.
Happy
Um,
family.
happy family living their best life. Um, just facilitated by like being able to achieve all the things, do all the things you need to be able to do to achieve your goals,
Mm.
but do them in a way that doesn't cost you your entire life.
Oh,
Because it takes a lot of work to be good at things. It takes a lot of work to grow companies and to build real impact in the world. And quite often you end up missing your life because you spent it all trying to build the perfect life. You ended up missing it.
mm,
And it's something I've always been consciously aware of for myself because I know that my natural tendency is to just throw myself into the work. And I have to actively try and pull myself back and remember that what am I actually doing this for? I'm like, I want a family and like, I want to have kids and settle down. And I've always thought like my motivation was to hustle hard in my young years so that I could have a family and not be absent. I
mm,
wanted that to be my goal. And it always has been. It's been a driving force for me. And if I could facilitate that for other people, that'd be amazing. Like if I could build a thing that allows people to
mm,
automate some of the hard things that they have to do, that just keeps things ticking over. It's the hard things of the sitting down every day to write a tweet or to read more about the thing that you care about or to keep up with the news in your area or whatever it is. Those things require commitment every day. and making that just a little bit easier for you so that you can spend that 20 minutes extra with your kids instead. That would be the job well done for me.
That's great. So it's also a picture of, your customer, their peak impact too. It's not just your ideal impact, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
no, I mean that it's me and my customer, that
mm,
picture, because they're able to use Weave to save time,
yeah,
which allows them to live their life as well. Rather than spending 2 hours writing SEO content, they spend 10 minutes telling Weave what content to write, and then they spend the other hour and 50 minutes with their kids.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Adrian. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.